Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into everything you need to know about squat, one of the most fundamental movements in fitness and in daily life. We'll cover what squat is, we'll break down squat anatomy, body composition and mobility. I'll guide you through different squat variation and technique to improve your form. We also talk about accessories like belt, knee sleeves and weightlifting shoes. We'll talk about butt wing, knee valgus and asymmetries. And finally, I'll give you some tips to how to teach squat mechanics to people who haven't squatted for many years, older people or even people coming back from injury. So let's get started. But what is a squat? The squat is one of the most fundamental movements for the human body, and it's much more than just an exercise in a gym. From using the toilet to getting up from a chair or even lowering yourself to talk to your child, we do this movement every single day without even thinking about it. In fact, in many cultures, squatting is still used as a resting position today. You'll often see people in parts of Asia or Africa squatting comfortably for an extended period of time to rest, to work, and even socialize. Our ancestors likely favored this position as well. However, in modern times, the convenience of chairs has made squatting less frequent in our daily lives. And while chairs are certainly a great invention, sitting for too long without incorporating some of the natural movement like the squat might lead to problems later in life. Use it or lose it. This is why it's essential to keep squatting as part of both your training and your daily routine. The squat involves the coordinated flexion of both the knees and the hips to lower the upper body. For example, on one end of the spectrum, we will have a movement with minimal knee flexion and maximal hip flexion. It will look like a hinge. On the other side of the spectrum, you will have full knee flexion with minimal hip flexion, and it will look like more like a sissy squat. And then there are all the different combination of knee and hip flexion in between. Some squat variation will have a maximal knee bend and a more upright torso. Some other variation will have a torso more leaning forward with less knee flexion. So there's no such a thing as a perfect squat technique. Rather, it's more like finding what works best for you and of course your goals. How we can squat can vary significantly depending on our body type, proportions, and mobility. Everyone's squat looks a bit different due to individual differences in anatomy and flexibility. And this is why it's very important to never compare your form to someone else's. Let's take an example. People with longer torso and smaller legs will have a much easier time to squat with an upright torso and deep. In contrast, people with long femurs will have to lean more forward to keep the balance while lowering to a deep squat. It will require a greater amount of mobility for them to squat very deep. And this doesn't mean that one way is better than the other. It just reflects how much body types can influence the way you move and the way you squat. A simple test will be try to squat with both your feet together. For some people, it's quite easy. For some, it's very difficult. And for some, it's impossible without missing the balance and falling backwards. Then you also have the hip structure. The shape and the depth of your hip socket can also influence your squat depth and your stance. Some people naturally have more external rotation at the hips, which allows them to squat wide more comfortably, while other people prefer a narrower stance. While we can't do anything about our body composition, working on ankle and hips mobility can help give you more option for squatting and help you improve your squat depth. So let's start with the ankles. A good ankle mobility can really help for squatting deeper. So first you need to check how much mobility you already have. A really easy way to do it is to use the wall. So you just need to let your knee travel over the toes and see how far you can come from the wall and still touch the wall with your knee. So a good amount of mobility will be 1.5 to 2 hands away from the wall. If you don't pass the test and need to work on your ankle mobility, then you can do those two exercises. The first one will be using a bench where you let your knee travel over your toes. You can also use your body weight to create even more tension or simply use a plate on your knee. Then you have the calf stretch using a bench and a plate. The goal here is trying to push your heel towards the ground to create a lot of tension around the Achilles tendon and also improve your dorsiflexion of the ankle. Then we have the knee. Make sure that your knee is moving freely through rotation, extension, and flexion. For the rotation, do gentle circular movement to start warming the knees up. For the flexion, you can use the couch stretch, which is also very good for the hip flexors. And then finally, you can do some dynamic one leg forward fold just to make sure that everything is untied behind the knee. Then finally, the hips. Here are three simple exercises to work on both the internal and the external rotation of the hips. The first one is the 90-90, where you rotate sidewards, just making sure that you're working on both the internal and the external rotation of the hips. Then you have the frog stretch, which is very good to open up for deeper squat. The side lunge is also a great option here. So now let's break down some barbell variations. The first one would be the back squat. This variation allows you to lift the heaviest. There are two main styles of back squat, the high bar and the low bar. The low bar is very common in the sport of powerlifting. The lower position of the bar allows the lifter to load more weight while squatting to parallel, which is the standard for their sport. The high bar is mostly common in the sport of weightlifting. The higher position of the bar allows the lifters to squat very deep, which is crucial for the sport of weightlifting, where you need a lot of power and strength from the deep bottom. Both of these variations require a lot of back rack mobility, open up at the thoracic spine. Doing a simple exercise like the wall stretch can help a lot improving this mobility. Then you have the front squat, where you hold the bar in front of the body. Holding the bar in front increases the demand of core engagement and upright torso. It emphasizes the quads much more as the knee travels further over the toes. The front rack mobility can be a limiting factor. So it's important to open up your front rack with simple exercises or simply by doing some other variation like the zombie, Macarena, or simply using lifting straps. Another variation is the Zercher squat. The bar rests in the crooks of the elbows, allowing an extremely upright torso and extremely deep squat. This is a great variation for beginners to understand squat mechanics without high amount of mobility. Then you have the overhead squat, which is primarily used in sport of weightlifting. This squat variation demands maximum amount of mobility at the ankle, the hips, and the shoulders. So this is definitely not accessible for everyone. One important thing here is that you don't need to have a perfect looking bodyweight squat to earn the right to use a barbell. If you're comfortable squatting with your body weight, then try one of the variations with the barbell, or even try with a kettlebell or a dumbbell. So let's refine your back squat technique using three simple variables: the foot stance, the angle of the feet, and the bar position. Just understand that the wider a stance, the more flexible your adductors need to be to allow a deep squat. The more narrow, the more flexible your ankles need to be. Once you find a position that feels comfortable for you, try to screw your legs into your feet. This will create a torque force. Keeping this tension will allow your knees to stay in line with your feet. The wider the angle of your feet, the more difficult it becomes to create the torque. Whether low or high, ensure that the bar stays in line with the midfoot throughout the whole lift for optimal balance. The higher the bar, the more upright you will need to be to stay in the right path. The lower the bar, the more you will have to lean forward to stay in balance. Tempo squat is a great tool to practice the bar path. By going down in a more controlled way, you can feel throughout the whole lift if you're in balance or not, and if you need to make some adjustments. Another sweet thing to do is to hold a pause in the bottom. This can first help you get more confident with the bottom position, but it can also help you getting more flexible since the weight is helping you opening even more up at the hips and at the ankles. Just keep in mind that the tempo and pauses make the lift more challenging, so I will not recommend them when you're going for performance. Then you have bracing. Before you descend, take a deep breath through your mouth for optimal compression, feel your belly, and brace your core. This helps keep your body tight and transfer energy effectively during the lift. It's very important that you hold your breath throughout the whole lift, but to avoid dizziness, try to exhale a little bit before reaching the top. You can take a couple of breaths at the top before repeating the process. It should feel like going underwater. How deep should you squat? The answer is always it depends on you and your goals. For example, if you're training for powerlifting, then you should definitely practice to go right to parallel and up again because it's very specific to the sport. If you're training for weightlifting or want to build power from the very bottom position for movements like pistols, for example, then you should definitely practice to go as deep as possible. In some sport like track and field, rugby, hockey, where it requires a very strong position around parallel, then it makes a lot of sense to squat to that level only, because it's very specific to their sport. So basically, squat as low as you need to. Elevating your heels can mimic a better ankle mobility, allowing you to squat deeper with a more upright torso. For example, if you want to target your quads more, but your ankle mobility is limiting your form, and front squat is definitely not an option. So elevating your heels is definitely a great solution. And this is why Olympic lifters use shoes with an elevated heel, because staying upright in the bottom position is critical for their sport. You can also do any kind of variation with elevated heels. The Zercher version will be for maximal depth. When lifting heavy, accessories like belt and knee sleeves can help you squat more effectively. The lifting belt is a great tool to help maintain core tightness during heavy squat. It helps create more intra-abdominal pressure, creating more stability, especially during heavy attempts. However, it's important not to over-tighten the belt. Leave some room to push your belly to it for maximal tension without compromising your breathing. For some people, using a belt can really make a big difference. Then you have knee sleeves. Knee sleeves provide compression and warmth and a little bit of stability for your knees during squats. While they don't prevent injuries, they can help support your knees when you're lifting heavy. Like the belt, the knee sleeves are most suited when you're lifting heavier weights. Now it's time to talk about three big myths around squatting. The first one is the butt wink. Many lifters experience their lower back rounding a little bit at the bottom of their squat. If it doesn't cause you pain, then it's not a problem and you shouldn't spend time trying to fix it. But if it causes you pain, maybe you're losing all your tension in the bottom of your squat. Try not to go as low and try to keep your lower back's integrity. Elevating your heels might help reduce the butt wink. And then we have the knee valgus. This inward movement of the knees is very common, even among elite athletes. So without going too deep into biomechanics, we have to understand that the hips rotate externally on the way down to keep the knee aligned with the feet for more balance and control. But right from 90 degrees, the hips will start rotating internally. The adductors will then serve as the primary hip extensor muscles, which indicates that the knee valgus can provide a mechanical advantage. And even though the glutes are in a mechanical disadvantage at the bottom of the squat, it doesn't mean that the knee valgus happens because of the glutes being too weak. And actually, some athletes at very high level use this strategy to recruit their adductors more and create more power and lift more weight. It's a very common technique in weightlifting and powerlifting, and it hasn't been shown to have any relation to knee pain or knee injury. It seems like people with long femur are more prone to knee valgus than others. However, if the knee valgus happens on the way down, it might be due to restriction at the ankle or at the hips. A wider stance can help people with limited ankle or long femurs. Warming up with exercises like monster walk can also help beginners understanding how to activate the glutes. Now, I'm not saying that we all should try to push our knees inwards for a better squat. It just means that if it happens to you, don't worry too much about it. It might be advantageous for you. Then we have asymmetries. It's very normal for one side of the body to be stronger and more flexible than the other one. Working on unilateral movements like lunges, split squats, step ups is a very good idea to make sure that you're working both legs individually. But it's important to understand that lifting with some small asymmetries is nothing harmful or dangerous. There are absolutely no evidence showing that lifting with asymmetries lead to injury or pain. Actually, it might be the opposite. When you experience pain somewhere, your body will adapt its movement patterns to avoid more pain. So it's very common to see imbalances in people already having knee pain or hip pain, for example. To summarize the three myths, if it's not causing you a problem, then there's no reason to fix it. So the last point will be, How would I teach my grandma, if she was alive, on how to squat, knowing that she hasn't squatted for many, many years and she probably lost the ability to squat very deep? This is how I would start. I would start using a bench or a chair or a box and make her sit down on the box and stand up again using help, like for example rings or something to hold on. Just teaching her how to sit down and get up using a ring. As she gets more and more comfortable, I will start by removing the ring and make her sit on the box or on the bench without any help. With time, I might add some weight. I could also ask her to lower her body from the bench to a lower position, for example, if she feels comfortable with it. With time, I will increase the depth using the same method, holding a ring, without a ring, with some weight. Finally, I could try a full range of motion squat, holding a ring, without holding a ring, and holding a weight. This is not the only method, but this is probably a method I will use with her. So that's it, you guys. Remember that squatting is extremely individual and no one technique fits all. Keep experimenting and try to find what works best for you and your goals. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a like and remember to subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you.